Now, with the latest employment figures revealing a steep decline in the number of self-employed individuals, entrepreneurs are experiencing difficulties getting businesses off the ground. Perhaps it was always the case. Our merchant cash advance provider Retail Capital recently conducted an online survey amongst small business owners in South Africa. The aim was to ascertain the accessibility of funding in the dealings of small businesses with traditional financial institutions. Now we have a look at the results of those findings with Retail Capital CEO David Lewis. Good morning, David. You have got quite a lot of interesting data here. It's no surprise to find that small companies battle, or small entrepreneurs battle to get funding, but what is the data telling us?
Morning, David. Actually, just to clarify, we sent our survey out to merchants, which are people who accept credit and debit cards as part of their business, and predominantly in the hospitality sector. Summarising some of the findings that we found, firstly, traditional lenders are still the main source of capital for this kind of an industry type. Although 50% of the respondents, 46% actually, responded and said that the single biggest business challenge that they have is access to working capital or the availability of finance. Almost 35% of the respondees said that they'd been unable to access capital from a traditional lender. And that's quite an important point, really. So the people that they are turning to, first of all, don't have the accessibility and the availability of that capital, and some of them aren't qualifying. And that's a key finding. What does seem to be surprising is that in a sector where there is a lot of competition, some would say perhaps not enough competition in financial services sector and the banks, you know, there are unsecured lenders, there are the big four or the big five, there are different kinds of banks in South Africa. You would have thought that some of them would have more of an appetite than others and that this would not be such a problem. Yeah, that's certainly the case. I think what we're finding is certain business sectors, certain segments, specifically in restaurant and hospitality, are finding it more difficult to find access to capital than others. And that really depends on the appetite of the lending institution. Looking at the lending on the one hand is an issue, then there's bureaucracy, isn't there? And this has been said time and again, the difficulty of starting a business in South Africa. There are these surveys that come out like where we stand in education, where we stand in science and technology and so on, and we come pretty far down on the list of the number of steps, for example, that you have to do to register a business or to get going. Certainly. One of the other frustrations that came out from the survey that we did, which was in order to obtain finance, one of the frustrations that you find was that the finance products that we have are relatively conservative. They're relatively structured, and there's a lack of flexibility in those products. Equally, the process of going for those funding mechanisms is time-consuming, it's complex, the process for the decision-making takes too long, and it isn't supportive of the kind of businesses that we're working with and the timing in which they need that capital. Of course, the banks might say, and other analysts of the entrepreneurial sector would say, you know, not everyone's going to be an entrepreneur. Not everyone who has an idea is going to make it work. And there is a view also that some people are born entrepreneurs and they would be 5 or 10% of the population. Others say anyone can be taught to do it. I suppose the point is, are things improving? Does your data, does your survey show that things are getting better, that more businesses are growing or more businesses are starting? So even if it's difficult to get capital and the bureaucracy sorted out, is it improving? Interestingly, the most common uses for capital were positive. So the most common use for the capital that they wanted was actually expansion. Following from that, it was equipment. Following from that, renovation. And after that, new opportunities or marketing for additional business, which was quite a surprise. There was a very small number of people were actually saying it was for consolidation of position or debt structuring or payment of arrears. So that was quite interesting. I think some of the reasons why we are conservative in our approach to credit is because of the mechanisms in which credit works. So typical traditional lending credit is a long-term product. It's a fixed installment, and it's a big investment. You know, and that's we find the retailers are looking for something which is shorter term, is linked to their business turnover, and generally helps them in the way in which they run their business.